A Michigan judge has ruled last week that children do not have a fundamental right to learn how to read and write. Now, this ruling, of course, came in response to a lawsuit filed by Public Counsel on behalf of children in the Detroit area. Now, these kids wanted to hold state authorities responsible or accountable, including people like Rick Snyder, who's the governor of Michigan, for what plaintiffs alleged were systemic failures depriving children of their right to literacy in school. Now, the suit also sought to fix crumbling schools, among other measures that in Detroit that would have cost about $500 million. So these students are saying, look, because we're going to school in areas that don't have any money, that don't have good teachers, that have overcrowded classrooms and infrastructure that's falling apart, our right to literacy, the ability to be able to learn to read and write, is being impacted, and that children are not getting educated in the way that they should. Now, U.S. District Judge Stephen Murphy III said, no, we don't think that you have a right to that. In fact, he said that even though literacy is important, you shouldn't have an expectation, a right to be taught. He said, plainly, literacy and the opportunity to obtain it is of uncalculable importance. As plaintiffs point out, voting, participating meaningfully in civic life, and accessing justice all require some measure of literacy. So, wait, that's a good argument for literacy being a fundamental right for all people. But no, he's saying that, well, even though it's all that stuff and just being able to, be a part of civil society, well, we don't think it's a right, a fundamental right. In fact, he said, those points do not necessarily make access to literacy a fundamental right, saying that, look, the Supreme Court had ruled in the past that the importance of service does not determine whether it must be regarded as fundamental. But education, it's education. Everybody should have a right to education, to be educated, and to be able to survive in modern society. You can't be part of modern society if you don't know how to read and write. We're not in the Middle Ages here, okay? You don't just work for some feudal lord and never learn how to read and write. No, that's very, very important. To say that a decent education and literacy is not a right is actually ridiculous, especially since we live in the wealthiest country in the entire world. Now, Ivy Bailey, president of the Detroit Federation of Teachers, said, quote, I'm shocked. The message that it sends is that education is not important, and it sends the message that we don't care if you're literate or not. We just don't care. We're not Saudi Arabia. And yet, here we are saying that fundamental education is not a right. Now, here's the thing. There are people that don't care. I mean, look at who brought this case. Poor inner city kids in Detroit. That's who brought this case. Well, guess what? Most of those are probably minority children. You don't think that there's some sort of racial component here? I mean, this case is about funding schools to make sure that they can actually properly teach these children. Now, this wouldn't happen in Beverly Hills, Michigan. Yes, there is a Beverly Hills here in Michigan, or East Grand Rapids. Now, those cities, and the reason that I point them out is because they would never have this problem. They're the wealthiest cities in the state. And therefore, if they're a wealthy city, then they have wealthy schools. And they have some of the best schools in the state. They don't have to worry about the walls falling down or asbestos in the walls or mold. They don't have to worry about any of that stuff. They don't have to worry about classrooms that are overcrowded and teachers that are not vetted. They don't have to worry about any of that. For them, good education is something that they will never have to go without ever. But when it comes to poor kids in the city, especially minority children, well, apparently they don't have a right to be literate. even especially if it's going to cost us any money. They're not worth it anyway. That's the mindset. I think to them, it's perfectly fine to keep them poor and illiterate. Why? Well, let me give you a reason. So, and look, they even mentioned, the judge mentioned a reason earlier, right? He said that participating meaningfully in civic life includes voting and getting justice. Well, you have to be literate for that. But if you don't know how to read and write, well, then you don't have access to those things. And if you don't have access to the polls, if you don't vote, well, then that's one less vote for people who are on the others, who are on your side. And it's one more vote for someone on the other side. So they want to keep people from getting involved in the political process. Look, Michigan is Republican ruled. We're technically a red state now, with Republican control of, Congress, the state house, and the governorship. How do you keep your power? Well, you keep people from voting. And what's a great way to keep people from voting? You make sure that they can't, either through voter suppression laws or, of course, making it so that they're unable to actually participate in the democratic process. This is about power. If you attack education and you make sure that nobody can get a good education, then you'll never have to worry about them challenging your power. And that's ultimately what this is about. Hey everybody, thanks for watching this video. If you want to see more like this, please hit the subscribe button below. And if you want to support truly independent progressive media, please consider becoming a patron at patreon.com/TYTNation.